I don't know if you've noticed, if you've been watching the Olympics, but after almost every gold medal, it seems, the athletes seem to want to talk about the sacrifice that goes into winning a race. All the self-discipline, all the training, all the preparation. Sally Pearson, holding up a gold medal, she said, "Now at last I can eat what I want to. I can sleep when I want to. Now," she said, "I just want to have a cheeseburger." Now that was a great sponsor moment for McDonald's, I know. Though I reckon I would have gone for a Grand Angus with a Coke and large fries. The point being though, the race is won and it's gold, which means for Sally the hard training's over. Day after day, year after year, she's been beating her body into submission, training day in, day out, working on every muscle group and not an extra gram of body fat. Same, of course, with the swimmers. Michael Phelps announcing his retirement. He said, "I am not sorry to say goodbye to the early morning training. Every day, dragging myself out of bed at the crack of dawn," he said, "and plunging into the freezing cold water." Now, I don't know. I kind of thought after all that time you'd kind of get immune to that, get used to it. Or at least when you're world champion, they might at least warm up the pool for you. But the reality is there is the world's greatest swimmer was jumping into exactly the same icy pool as everybody else. They call them the games, but it's tough work. At the end of the race, if you're a winner, it's worth it. 4 years without cheeseburgers, punishing your body day after day, 4 years of cold water, punishing yourself for the prospect of the prize. Which, did you notice, is exactly the picture the Apostle Paul's painting of the race that he's in and that you and I are in too. I want to take you to those words at the end of the section we just read, because that's what he says in a perfectly timed Olympic-themed Bible passage. "Do you not know," chapter 9, verse 24, "that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize." Everyone who competes in the games, he says, goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that won't last. But we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, he says, "I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I don't fight like a man just beating the air. No, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I've preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize." I'm in tough training, says Paul, because I'm running for the prize. I am playing to win. Now, it's interesting, if you work your way back in the passage a little bit, it's interesting that when you ask the question, what is Paul actually trying to win? You get the answer just up the page a little bit in verse 19. Have a look at his words. He says, "Though I'm free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible." Now, do you notice, you see there, he's talking about winning people. This is kind of awkward if you're here this morning and you're not actually at the point of being a Christian, but the fact is, you see, if the Apostle Paul was here in person this morning, he would be bending over backwards to win you to faith. And to be honest, I'm kind of hoping there are some other Christians here this morning with the same point of view. See, ask Paul what a win looks like. Ask him what he's in training to win. And the answer is he's giving it all he's got to win people to faith in Jesus Christ. Paul says, what I do is I make myself a servant to everyone to win as many as possible, which is a principle that sees him in some very, very practical ways, punishing himself, shelving his own preferences for the sake of the gospel. At every point here in chapters 8 through to 10, Paul is taking options that are hard on himself to see other people served and saved and sticking with it so they're won for the kingdom of God. While the Corinthians, in contrast, the people he's writing to, would rather just have arguments and stand on their own rights and prove themselves right and everyone else wrong and do things the way they prefer, no matter what. Now, have you noticed, if you're a Christian, it is sometimes very easy to win the battle and lose the war. It's easy to think that you'll win over your non-Christian friend by constantly debating them and winning on points and proving that your worldview is so much better than their worldview, that you're right and that they're wrong. And of course, they'll just end up thinking Christians are just argumentative. It's a little bit like the kid the first time he plays golf, coming home pleased and boasting that he's got the highest score of anyone on the day. So in the end, you might be racking up the points, but you're not winning anyone to the kingdom at all. Just the opposite. And so in Corinth, you've got the issue splitting the church here in chapter 8, if you look back and run your eye over it, of whether or not you can eat meat that's been sacrificed at the idol temple. Now, that's not something we tend to argue about much these days, but back then, almost all the meat was offered in the idol temple. They'd sacrifice the sheep and the cattle at the idol temple. They'd hold a big public banquet in honour of the Roman emperor and the other gods, and then they'd sell off all the rest of the meat in the meat market. At which point some of the Christians are saying, well, you can eat the meat that's been offered to idols because idols are nothing at all, they're just blocks of wood. And other Christians are saying, no, you can't eat it because it's been sacrificed to an idol. The main problem being that both sides know that they are in the right. Now take a look how Paul starts, chapter 8, verse 1. Now, about food sacrificed to idols. We know that we all possess knowledge, but do you know what? Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. So he starts talking about the issue, but in the very next breath, it's about attitude. Now he says, if you think that an idol is nothing at all, you're absolutely right. You're free to eat whatever you want. But he says, what if there's someone who thinks otherwise? There is someone of the other view. What if there's someone who is convinced that it's wrong to eat meat from the temple, but you persuade them to go against their conscience and to do it anyway? Now look, it's a complicated point he's making. You need to read through the chapter carefully, chat about it in growth group. But the bottom line is simple. He says, I would much rather do what is harder for me if it's better for another. I will do what's harder for me for the sake of the conscience of someone else. He says, I'm not in the business of winning arguments. I'm in the business of winning hearts. So therefore, he says, verse 13, therefore, if what I eat causes my brother to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause him to fall. Falling into sin at that point being, if in your own mind it is against your conscience, and if in your own mind you think it dishonours God, and then you do it anyway, then it actually does dishonour God in your heart. Shows what you think of him. Now for us, as I said, that's maybe a really odd example, but the point is, you see, Sally Pearson went without a cheeseburger for 4 years to win at the Olympics. Paul is prepared to give up cheeseburgers forever to save a brother from falling like that and to so win him for the kingdom. Paul is prepared to put his meat-eating preferences aside for the good of someone else. No more steak. No more beef musselman. No more cheeseburgers. He's not even going to argue the point. Now, I just want to ask you this morning to think through, do you ever do anything like that for anybody else? With anything? If you are a Christian, are you ever prepared to be weaker, look less impressive, be less right about everything, to graciously defer, to be less puffed up and more about building up? Paul says, I just want to do what's best for the other guy. Knowledge puffs up, love builds up. Which is it for you? Now, there's more of the same, chapter 9, Paul putting his own rights aside for the sake of the gospel. Now, the routine thing is, says Paul, that a preacher in a church is supported by the church. The routine thing, he says, is that the travelling apostles, with their wives as well, They are supported financially so they can preach the gospel. He says you don't muzzle the ox while it's treading the grain. Except in Corinth, you might remember from the first week in our series, where there's all this buzz about the travelling public speakers called the sophists, who make their living on the speaker's circuit with their famous battle speech recitals and their public advice and their wisdom and their eloquence. Those guys are raking in the big bucks. Now you might remember back at the start, Paul said, I don't want you to mix me up with them. He said, when I came to you, I didn't come with smooth sounding words. I came to you with weakness and trembling and the message of Jesus. And you know, Paul so much doesn't want to be mistaken for a travelling salesman, sophistic public speaker, that in spite of his right to financial support, he says, I won't take even $1 from you. I never did and I never will. He says, when I came to you, I paid my own bills, in spite of his rights otherwise. And he demonstrates those rights 10 times over. Who serves as a soldier at his own expense, verse 7? Who plants a vineyard and doesn't eat the grapes? He says, I had every right to be supported. Down to verse 12, chapter 9. If others have this right of support from you, shouldn't we have it all the more? But we did not use this right. On the contrary, we put up with anything rather than hinder the gospel of Christ. We put up with anything, any cost. Pardon me. Any inconvenience, any unfairness. So at that point he says we beat our bodies into submission for the sake of the gospel. And what's in it for Paul himself? Look again, verse 18 and 19. What then is my reward? Just this, that in preaching the gospel I may offer it free of charge, and so not make use of my rights in preaching it. Though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. Now expands on that in the next few verses. Here's what he means. When he's with Jews, he will do things their way. When he's with Gentiles, he'll do things their way. Not because he's inconsistent, but because he is ignoring his own preferences for the sake of theirs. These are very famous verses. Read from verse 20. To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law. Though I'm not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I've become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. All things, all men, all possible means to save some. Now, look, one quick example, and I don't want to be rude to anyone, but we mentioned before the Brecky Church survey, and we're running a trial in a few weeks, how we're going to try this early morning church idea, where we said clearly, as we've talked about it over the last month or two, we're just looking for ways to connect more people with our church and win more people to the Lord Jesus. Now, Brecky Church is not meant to be everyone's thing. I'm just using it to illustrate a point. Because you see, it was kind of surprising in the anonymous survey, the number of people who said stuff like, I'm not really interested because I don't like toast for breakfast. So when you think about it, Brecky Church is at no point about toast. It's not even about breakfast. It's about making opportunities for friends to hear the gospel. And if coffee and toast can help you with that, even if you don't prefer coffee and toast, let's have coffee and toast. Now for Paul, you see, there are all kinds of things like that. Mixing with Jews, he'll be one way. Mixing with Greeks, he'll be another. Just bending over backwards to connect with them. Now again, if you're a Christian here this morning, can I ask you, have you ever done that for anybody? Paul says, I train, I go at it as if I mean business. I beat my body, my preferences, my likes. I put them aside in every way, in the hope that in every possible way, in some small ways, I might play a part in winning some by being more winsome, by connecting with the people around me on their terms instead of only ever on my terms. Now, at this point, someone will always say, Paul, isn't that just compromise? To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law. To the Greeks, I became like a Greek to win the Greeks. Have you seen what those Greek Corinthians get up to? Their idol feasts, their emperor celebrations, call girls on tap, temple prostitutes. Now, Paul says, I'm not for a moment saying you compromise on that stuff. The first part of chapter 10, he says, you've got to remember Israel and the way God scattered their bodies through the desert because they chased after evil things. He says, don't be complacent, don't compromise with evil stuff in the guise of fitting in. That's not what I'm talking about. Take a warning from Israel, chapter 10, verse 7. Don't be idolaters, as some of them were, as it's written. The people sat down to eat and drink and got up to engage in pagan revelry. We should not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did. And in one day, 23,000 of them died. Now, he's already said, do you remember, back a couple of chapters, chapter 7, flee from sexual immorality, run away. Verse 14 here in chapter 10, flee from idolatry as well. Don't compromise for a moment with their idol feasts. Don't sit at their table when you're part of the Lord's table. See, here's the principle. There is huge freedom in being Christian, but use that freedom for other people and not yourself, which is the absolute essence of living a cross-shaped life. Pick it up in verse 23. Everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. Everything is permissible, but not everything is constructive. So here's the principle again, verse 24. Nobody should seek his own good, but the good of others. Whether it's what you eat from the meat market, whether it's what you eat for breakfast, Paul says there is a way to do it selfishly and there is another way to do it for the glory of God. It takes training to even notice the difference. It takes discipline. It takes an attitude that says at every point, I'm doing this for a higher purpose, to win a bigger prize. Hear it again, verse 30 and 31 in chapter 10. So whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Don't cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews, Greeks, or the church of God, even as I try to please everybody in every way, for I am not seeking my own good, but the good of many, so that they may be saved. And in case you think he doesn't mean for you to do the same, the words at the start of chapter 11, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Here we are right at the very heart of cross-shaped living and what it looks like. The tiny day-to-day decisions, even things like what you eat, what you drink, what you do, whether you'll cause another person to stumble, whether you care, whether you're keen to please others or you just want to please yourself, whether you're constantly seeking your own good or the good of other people. Now you know what Jesus did. He gave up everything. You know what Paul did? He put aside every preference of his own and he says, you do the same. Can I just finish this morning by saying if you are really in the business of wanting to win other people, see them saved, of seeing people won for Christ, you will need to be in training for that in countless small ways that are often going to hurt. For all of us, this sort of stuff just doesn't come naturally. It takes training, it takes self-discipline, it takes a commitment to doing what's best for other people. Small things, tiny things sometimes. Things like where you sit in church. stories I've heard from the old days about, that person who finally gets up the courage to come to church, they're looking for answers, and the first words they hear from another person in church is, "You're sitting in my seat." Have you met people like that in churches? I've met people like that in churches. Small things like where you park your car on a Sunday morning, choosing to park further away so other people can park closer. Small things like what you do with your time, like how you connect with your neighbours. Things like what you assume about the people you chat with after church. You might just assume they're Christian already in all kinds of ways, rather than finding out where they're at, looking to help. Looking for opportunities to explain and be clear. I'm not just talking about theological jargon words at this point that some Christians just love to use, but there's all sorts of stuff we assume. I've mentioned before, but I know one church where the pastor every week welcomes visitors and points out where the toilets are. By the way, they're out the back there if you're visiting today. But one guy came to him and complained. He said, "We know where the toilets are. We've been coming here 50 years. Which is really just not putting yourself in the position of that person here the first time, is it? If you're in the business of seeing other people won to following Jesus, you'll stop trying to be impressive and being right all the time. Whatever way you do that, for some of us that's a very natural thing to do. But you see, it is not about you, however it might hurt to hear that. When you meet somebody new, if you're thinking about them and not yourself, you'll mainly listen rather than mainly talk, because it's not about you. You'll be hospitable, you'll introduce yourself even if you're shy. You'll invite and include people instead of sticking to your comfort zone of just your family or your friends who you've known forever. You might even think about attending something for the sake of other people, even if you don't like toast for breakfast. You might come to something and help, set up chairs, even though it's not your personal interest or personal passion. It's all in the small stuff. And it's all a discipline in training for those ultimate wins of seeing someone else so struck by your cross-shaped example that they're actually drawn to Jesus rather than pushed away.